The body obtains energy to carry out its living processes from substances known as food. Within the alimentary canal, complex substances in foodstuffs are changed into simpler forms which can be absorbed into the blood. This process is called digestion. Part of the alimentary canal, or digestive tract, is now being displaced so that some of its coiled regions can be more clearly seen. During the passage of food along the canal, digestive fluids act upon it, changing complex substances into simple, soluble forms which can be absorbed into the blood and carried to the tissues. By the action of muscles in the canal wall, foodstuffs are thoroughly mixed with digestive fluids and are moved along the tract. During this process, useful substances are absorbed into the blood. The remainder is finally expelled from the body. Let us first consider the muscular and mechanical processes of digestion. These begin in the mouth. The funnel-shaped space at the back of the mouth is called the pharynx. Two tubes open out from the lower part of the pharynx. This one starts as the larynx and continues as the trachea. It carries air to the lungs. The second tube is the esophagus. It carries food to the stomach. In the mouth, food is cut and ground by the teeth. This is called mastication. The tongue has been made transparent so that the teeth on the far side can be seen. The food is moved about and gradually pushed towards the back of the mouth by the action of the tongue and the cheek muscles. The food is gradually collected onto the back of the tongue and swallowed. During mastication, food is well mixed with a digestive fluid called saliva. The mixture of food and saliva is collected onto the back of the tongue in the form of a bolus. In swallowing, the larynx goes up and slightly forward to prevent food from entering the trachea. Let us see the chewing and swallowing actions once again. The movement of the bolus is no longer under voluntary control once the action of swallowing is started. The larynx goes up and forwards, the bolus is propelled through the pharynx, and immediately it enters the esophagus, it is pushed along it by contractions of the muscles in the wall of the tube. Muscles behind the food contract, while those in front of it relax. The pincer-like contractions behind the bolus push it into the relaxed portion of the tube ahead of it. The muscles in the wall of the esophagus are arranged in two layers. The inner ones are placed in a circular direction, and the outer ones in a longitudinal direction. The wall of the alimentary canal, along its whole length, has this outer coat of muscles and an inner lining called the mucous membrane, which varies in structure in different regions. The esophagus passes down inside the chest, through the diaphragm, the dome-shaped sheet of muscle separating the chest from the abdomen, and then leads into the stomach. The outer part of the stomach wall is largely made up of muscle fibers running in 3 directions. The outermost coat is longitudinal, the middle coat circular, and the third, incomplete coat is oblique. This is the stomach in section. The swallowed food collects in the stomach. It is gradually pressed from the upper part, the fundus, towards the lower, the pyloric end. This is brought about by rhythmic contractions of the muscles in the stomach wall. At the upper end of the stomach, small contraction waves occur, often in groups and at intervals of about 20 seconds. The stomach shown here is about half full. The rate of expansion of the stomach and the spreading of the food from the center towards the wall are greatly speeded up. In the lower, the pyloric end of the stomach, sometimes called the pyloric mill, vigorous waves of muscular movement take place. In an active stomach, about 3 large waves of contraction take place a minute. These contractions churn the food and thoroughly mix it with the digestive fluid secreted by the inner lining of the stomach. As a result of this churning and mixing, the food becomes a thin liquid mass. This is the pyloric end of the stomach. Its opening into the small intestine is normally kept closed by contraction of the circular muscles. It opens at intervals, and small quantities of partly digested food are shot out of the stomach into the first region of the small intestine, the duodenum. The small intestine is a coiled tube about 20 feet in length. The first region, the duodenum, is so called because it is about 12 inches long. The middle region is the jejunum. The lower region is the ileum. In the muscular outer wall of the small intestine, the muscles run in 2 directions, some in a longitudinal direction and some in a circular direction. These muscle fibers contract behind and relax in front of the food, squeezing it along in the same wave-like movement seen in the esophagus. This type of movement by the involuntary intestinal muscles is called peristalsis and takes place along the whole length of the alimentary canal. Only part of the small intestine is shown moving here so that the movements can be clearly seen. Two other kinds of muscular movement take place in the small intestine. In segmentation, pincer movements by the muscles squeeze the intestine and its contents into a series of segments. New pincer movements then occur in the middle of the existing segments, and the previous contractions relax. Segmentation aids the mixing and absorption of the food. A swaying, pendulum-like movement also takes place. The intestines are supported by a delicate membrane containing blood vessels, the mesentery. To show the mesentery, some of the intestines have been moved out of position. Digested food is gradually absorbed into the blood in the blood vessels in the intestinal wall, and this blood passes through the mesenteric veins into the portal vein. The blood flows through the portal vein to the liver. Some forms of food pass into lymphatic vessels and not into blood vessels. The undigested and indigestible part of food and a great deal of water and salts pass out of the small intestine into the large intestine, the colon. The appendix is at the beginning of the colon. The colon passes up the right side of the abdomen and turns below the liver. It then crosses to the left side of the body. The colon is about 5 feet long and is a much wider tube than the small intestine. The contents of the colon are moved along by peristalsis, as in the esophagus and the small intestine, but the movement is slower. As a result of this forward movement, the contents of the colon accumulate in the lower end of the descending colon, out of which they are finally expelled from the body. During their passage through the first parts of the colon, much of the water and some of the salts are absorbed into the blood in the colon wall blood vessels and carried away through the mesenteric veins and the portal vein to the liver. This absorption of water and salts makes the remaining waste material a semi-solid, which is eventually expelled from the body via the rectum. As a result of the mechanical and muscular processes we have seen, and the chemical changes which accompany them, the body is able both to select from an immense variety of foodstuffs substances necessary to its life, and to get rid of surplus and waste material.